When I was in ninth grade, our class went on a short school trip to an old countryside hostel near the forest. It was supposed to be a history excursion, but by the time the bus pulled up, the sun was already sinking, painting the place in that strange half-light where everything feels too quiet. The hostel itself was just 2 floors, but the building was over 100 years old. It had once been a small hospital during the war. The staff didn't talk much about it, but the local guide mentioned that some rooms upstairs had been closed off for decades. They had only been reopened a few months earlier after renovations. I didn't think much of it then. I was assigned to room 6 with my 2 friends, Amir and Reza. The first thing I noticed was that the air inside felt heavier than in the hallway. A stale, almost metallic smell, like rust. The windows were small and the curtains permanently drawn. One corner of the room had an odd dark patch on the wooden floor, almost like water damage, except it was shaped almost perfectly round. That night, around 1:30 a.m., I woke up to the sound of someone whispering. At first, I thought it was Amir or Reza, but when I turned, both were fast asleep. The whispering was low, coming from the corner with the dark patch. I couldn't make out words, just a slow, steady murmur, like someone speaking through a wall. I told myself it was probably the wind. Tried to close my eyes, but then the bed frame gave a long creak, as if someone had sat down on the end of it. I froze. The weight pressed slightly against my legs. I was too scared to move, so I just stared at the far wall, trying not to breathe too loudly. After what felt like forever, the pressure lifted. I thought maybe I'd imagined it, until I heard footsteps moving away. But they didn't sound like they were walking on wood. It was more like the dragging shuffle of bare feet on tile, except the floor was wood. The next morning, I told my friends, but they just laughed. Still, we all noticed something. The round patch in the corner was darker, like it had been wet overnight. On our last day, I mentioned it to the old caretaker. He looked at me strangely and asked, "Room 6?" When I nodded, he said quietly, "You're the second group to sleep there since we reopened it. The first group, they didn't last the night. During the war, that was the operating room. The patch you saw, that's where the drain used to be. We left that afternoon. The trip was over, and everyone was just happy to be heading home. After that, life went back to normal. Life." I was in my last year of middle school. The weather that spring day was unusually warm, and I left school early because the last class was canceled. I decided to take the river path home. I loved that path, quiet, lined with trees on both sides, with the sound of birds mixing with the gentle murmur of the water. A few minutes from school, I saw a man sitting on a wooden bench near the riverbank, feeding pigeons. I didn't think much of it, until he turned toward me, smiled, and said, "Beautiful day, isn't it?" I gave him a quick smile and kept walking. But after a few steps, I heard footsteps behind me. I turned and saw him following, holding a black bag. I tried to convince myself he was just heading in the same direction. But when I reached the small bridge that connected the 2 banks, he came closer, said he knew my family, claimed he was a friend of my father, and offered to drive me home. A wave of unease hit me. I thanked him and said my mother was waiting for me. But his expression changed, and his voice turned cold as he said, "Come on, it won't take long." I stepped back, but he grabbed my arm tightly. I shoved him away and ran down the narrow path between the trees, hearing his footsteps getting faster and closer. I reached a rocky part near the river, slipped and almost fell in, but managed to grab a tree trunk. Suddenly, I heard dogs barking in the distance and saw an elderly man on the hill tending his livestock. He waved his stick, shouted toward the man, and made a phone call. My pursuer stopped, looked at him, then bolted into the forest. Minutes later, the police arrived. They told me he was wanted for previous abduction cases and had been hanging around the area for days. That riverside path has never felt the same since. And now, Whenever I pass it, I feel the calm beauty hides dangers we can't always see. It was the end of my sophomore year, just a few days before summer break. Our school was mostly empty because many students had already left for vacation. One afternoon, I stayed late to finish a project in the library. The halls were eerily silent, the usual chatter replaced by only the hum of the fluorescent lights overhead. After finishing, I decided to take the shortcut through the old science wing to get to the exit faster. This wing had been closed for repairs for weeks, but a door near the library was unlocked. I didn't think much of it and stepped inside. The hallway was dim, with flickering lights and dusty floors. Suddenly, I heard footsteps behind me. Slow, deliberate, but no one was there when I turned around. I quickened my pace, but the footsteps grew louder and closer. I reached the end of the hallway and pushed open the heavy door, only to find it locked from the outside. Panic set in as I realized I was trapped. Then, in the silence, a faint whisper called my name. I don't know how long I stood there frozen before a janitor found me. He told me no one was supposed to be in that wing and that the door was supposed to be locked tight. No one else was around. To this day, I don't know who or what was following me in those empty halls.